Number 8. When the government fails to maintain our infrastructure, the results can be catastrophic.
In Minneapolis, Minnesota, the highway I-35 crosses the Mississippi River. This 8-lane freeway was supported by a steel truss arch bridge. In 1991 and then again in 2005, the bridge was deemed structurally deficient by government regulators. The reason for this designation is that the designers had used metal plates that were too thin as a junction for several of the supports. Then, 575,000 extra pounds were added to the bridge when the state government decided to install concrete structures to separate the east and the westbound traffic. The final straw that broke the bridge's back came on August 1st, 2007, during rush hour traffic when approximately 100 vehicles were on the structure. The 1,900-foot bridge suddenly collapsed, sending vehicles and 18 construction workers down 115 feet to the river below. 13 people lost their lives and 145 were injured. A poignant reminder that simply inspecting a structure isn't sufficient. Governments need to make sure that they're actively repairing our deficient infrastructure.
Number 7.
Hurricane Katrina made landfall on the Gulf Coast on August 9th, 2005. The Category 3 storm brought 140-mile-per-hour winds across 400 miles of land and flooded the city of New Orleans. It caused $100 billion in property damage, and more importantly, 1,800 people to lose their lives. The salt that irritates this deep wound is that the damage was greatly intensified by the failures of Congress, the Bush administration, and FEMA. Many of FEMA's top executives were just political appointees with little disaster experience. That bears repeating. The executives of the Federal Emergency Management Agency had little disaster experience. What may be most appalling is that FEMA officials obstructed private relief efforts. They blocked the delivery of emergency supplies that were ordered by the New Orleans hospitals. They turned away doctors from volunteering their services at emergency facilities. And they denied the Red Cross and all of their emergency supplies access to the Superdome. Part of what made Hurricane Katrina so destructive is that the levees that were built to protect New Orleans were outrageously weak. Levee breaches led to massive flooding. 6 months after the storm, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers released a report in which they took blame for the levees breaking. They explicitly admitted that these levees were built with poor design and weak material. Key levees in the heart of the city failed when the water was well below the levels they were designed to withstand. But to give credit where credit is due, the Coast Guard rapidly deployed 4,000 service members and rescued 30,000 people in the days that followed the storm.
Number 6.
Precious lives and billions of dollars can be lost when the government mismanages public land. Here in Southern California, summer means a few things: beautiful weather, beach volleyball, bikinis, and forest fires. Every summer, the forest is a sitting tinderbox, just waiting for a downed power line or some airhead camper to start an earth-scorching blaze. As the droughts in the West have become worse over the years, so too have the fire seasons. But something that doesn't get a lot of attention is that a sizable portion of the blame for these exacerbated fires falls at the feet of the federal government. In total, the US government owns about 640 million acres of land, mostly in the western states, and it has shown itself to be a poor steward of these areas. Our national forests suffer from mismanagement and neglect, and this results in overcrowding, and that leaves them susceptible to disease, insects, and forest fires. Currently, an average of 7 million acres of forest land burns each year in the United States. Rural and suburban communities have been hit hard. Some people have lost their homes, and sadly, others have lost their lives due to these fires. So what's the solution? According to Scott Stevens, a professor of fire science at the University of Berkeley, a big step in the right direction is to increase preemptive forest fighting efforts such as forest thinning, which involves the removal of highly flammable material like dead trees. Additionally, he recommends performing prescribed burns that clear out the combustible material on the forest floor. Oh, hey, didn't see you there. Hope you're enjoying the video. Hey, if you haven't already, I've got an idea. Why don't you hit that subscribe button? And hey, turn on notifications because that way you'll never miss any of our newest videos. Remember, the power is yours. Number 5. When the government fails to regulate the oil industry, it can devastate the environment. Back in April of 2010, the Gulf of Mexico experienced the largest marine oil spill in history. On the 20th of April, an explosion on the Deepwater Horizon oil rig, located 41 miles off the coast of Louisiana, blasted across the rig's platform, killing 11 workers and injuring 17 more. Oil and natural gas began escaping into the ocean. The Deepwater Horizon rig, which was owned by British Petroleum, sunk, and over the course of the next 87 days, 130 million gallons of oil spilled out of the well. Soon after, a ruling by a federal judge found BP guilty of gross negligence and placed the majority of the blame for the spill on the oil company. However, since 2010, more information has seeped out and revealed that the federal government was also at fault. A report from the Huffington Post and the Associated Press found that the Mineral Management Service inspected the Deepwater Horizon far less often than its own guidelines indicated it should have. Additionally, the government failed to implement a regulatory process that would standardize basic rig requirements aimed at mitigating and preventing oil spills. The fallout from the incident and information regarding the failure of the government to follow its own safety guidelines led the Obama administration to fire Elizabeth Birnbaum, the director of the Minerals Management Service. Number 4. Should the federal government be punishing students for bad test scores? Public education for every child has been an American ideal for over a century, but it has always been a state and local responsibility. However, in 2002, the Bush administration helped push through the No Child Left Behind Act. The main idea behind the act is something that most people can get behind: to provide additional federal resources for states to level the playing field between schools in wealthy and poor districts. The trouble in paradise comes in the form of standardized testing. The law mandated that all students hit arbitrary test scores on standardized tests. The intent was that by setting high standards for students, the law would be able to hold schools accountable in meeting measurable success. Schools that didn't meet the grading criteria were punished in the form of cutting funding or even school closure. Opponents of the law argued that it created an environment where teachers taught to the exam and not with the goal of increasing the broader learning of the students. Most disheartening is that the government increased the Department of Education's annual budget by $24.6 billion. But all that extra spending barely improved the test scores, and it was ineffective in closing the education gap between the rich and the poor schools. Number 3. Bernie Madoff. That is a name that will forever be synonymous with fraudster. Madoff is currently serving a 150-year sentence in federal prison. In the early 2000s, Bernie pulled off the biggest financial fraud in history right under the nose of government regulators. His scheme inflicted about $50 billion in losses and also revealed tremendous government incompetence. Embarrassing stories keep leaking out of the Security Exchange Commission, which is now being described as aggressively clueless. The SEC had been tipped off by both external and internal investigators, but actively ignored the signs of Madoff's malfeasance. Oh snap! I just said the word of the day: malfeasance. Malfeasance means wrongdoing. Good synonyms would be misbehavior and misconduct. See if you can use malfeasance in a sentence in the comment section below, and we'll feature the person with the most creative phrase in our next video. Number 2. This next one is a bit lighthearted, but still embarrassing. The Affordable Care Act was signed by President Obama on March 23, 2010. It required that the United States Department of Health and Human Services launch a website that would allow residents to compare prices of and enroll in healthcare plans. The department had 3 years to plan out and build the site, and on October 1, 2013, healthcare.gov was launched. How did it go? Well, about as well as the Han Solo movie. The website crashed within 2 hours of launch. What makes it more humiliating is that the thing wasn't even finished. Users were complaining that the drop-down menus weren't complete, and the insurance companies reported that the site wasn't accurately transferring client data. A grand total of 6 users were able to select an insurance plan on that first day. This public debacle was another problematic obstacle that marred Obama's effort to advance his healthcare agenda. Number 1. The fall of 2004 was met with the macabre spectacle of a severe shortage of the flu vaccine that was felt across the country. The elderly and the chronically ill waited in line for hours just to get a flu shot. Price gougers demanded $800 for a $60 vial of the vaccine. In hindsight, this is another tragedy that could have easily been avoided. Public health experts had long cautioned against the country's dependence on just a few vaccine makers. Unfortunately, there was no one person or agency that was in charge of making sure that the US had an adequate vaccine supply. Many pharmaceutical companies had left the flu vaccine business because of the high expense and the high risk of creating a new vaccine each year. There was no attempt by the government to incentivize these companies to continue flu vaccine production. So when 2004's flu season rolled around, there was only 2 manufacturers for the entire country. The good news is that the government has increased its financing for research into more reliable manufacturing techniques for the vaccine, and has explored a few other measures to lure more manufacturers into the flu vaccine industry. Thanks for watching. Hope you liked the video. Would you rather be responsible for fighting a forest fire or fighting a flood? Let us know in the comments below. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and check back soon for a new video. Bye.